Good morning, everyone. I would like to thank the media for joining us today. My name is Barbara Barrett, and I'm the Executive Director of the Frontier Duty Free Association. Following my introduction, Philippe Bichon, board member for the association, will repeat the introduction in French, and he will be available to facilitate French-speaking questions as well. We will open the floor to questions after the remarks and ask that you use the raise hand function to do so, to ask a question. Now, the Canada-US land border is one of the greatest economic and cultural assets this country has. It's more than just a dividing line. It's a shared space where families, communities, and businesses have thrived for generations, thanks to the ability to move back and forth across the border with ease. Border communities across Canada have built their local economies around that flow of people, trade, and tourism. Border community businesses that depend on cross-border traffic, like duty-free stores, which are 100% reliant on Canadians crossing into the United States, are at a breaking point. These shops are often the anchor employers in their small communities, driving tourism spending and supporting local jobs. Now, they're facing literal demise due to multiple factors: ongoing tariff threats, a sharp and sustained drop in cross-border traffic, and even our political leaders discouraging Canadians from crossing the border altogether. And all of this after still not being recovered from the 20-month-long border closure during the pandemic. Across Canada, our border community businesses are in crisis. Today, you'll hear from the mayors who represent these regions, and they're sounding the alarm. We are calling on the federal government to step up now with the targeted financial support and a plan that recognizes the unique vulnerabilities of border-dependent communities and the businesses that keep them alive. Thank you again for being here. I'll now turn it over to Philippe to repeat in French.
Merci beaucoup, Barbara. C'était Barbara Barrett, directrice générale de l'Association Frontières hors taxes. Elle sera notre modératrice aujourd'hui. Et moi, je suis Philippe Bichon, membre du conseil d'administration de cette même association. Je serai en charge de la section francophone de cette conférence de presse. Bonjour, nous voulons remercier les médias qui se joignent à nous aujourd'hui. Nous serons disponibles pour les questions à la suite des commentaires de chacun des participants. Nous vous demandons d'utiliser la fonction de la main levée pour poser vos questions. La frontière canado-américaine est un des plus grands atouts économiques et culturels de ce pays. C'est plus qu'une démarcation, c'est un espace commun où des familles, des communautés et des entreprises ont prospéré pour des générations grâce à la possibilité de traverser la frontière facilement. Partout au Canada, les communautés frontalières ont bâti leur économie locale autour de cette circulation de personnes, d'échanges commerciaux et de tourisme. Les entreprises de ces communautés frontalières sont à la merci du tourisme transfrontalier. Elles sont à un point de rupture, telles que les boutiques hors taxes qui dépendent à 100% des Canadiens qui traversent la frontière vers les États-Unis. Ces magasins sont souvent des employeurs clés dans leur petite communauté. Ils stimulent les dépenses touristiques et supportent l'emploi local. Aujourd'hui, ils font face à une possible disparition due à plusieurs facteurs. Des menaces tarifaires persistantes, une baisse de trafic substantielle. Nous avons même les leaders politiques qui exhortent les Canadiens à ne pas traverser la frontière. Et ceci à la suite d'une fermeture de plus de 20 mois pendant la pandémie. Fermeture dont les boutiques hors taxes ne s'étaient pas encore remises. Au Canada, d'un océan à l'autre, les communautés frontalières sont en crise. Aujourd'hui, vous entendrez les maires de ces régions tirer la sonnette d'alarme. Nous demandons au gouvernement fédéral d'intervenir dès maintenant en fournissant un soutien financier ciblé et un plan qui reconnaît la vulnérabilité unique de ces communautés qui dépendent de la frontière et des entreprises qui les gardent en vie. Encore merci d'être ici avec nous. Je cède maintenant la parole à M. Mike Bradley, maire de Sarnia. Mayor Bradley.
Thank you. And I thank my colleagues for joining us today. We're in a very difficult situation as border cities, as you all know. We stood by the actions of the federal government when they closed the border during COVID. And I think our voice has made a big difference in the public support for understanding the damage would be big in our communities, but we knew we had to do it for the right reasons. And now we are today in a position with all the activities going on, the tariffs, all the rhetoric, seeing our cities struggling. And I want to make it clear that I'm certainly not anti-American, never have discouraged anyone from crossing the border, but the issues in front of us are so big and life-changing for our communities. We need the federal government to fully understand as they look to different sectors to assist them through the tariffs that will be coming, that duty-free stores and border communities specifically need direct support to deal with what's happening here. We're feeling the pain and we're on the front line. That's just the reality of being a border city. There are many joys to being a border city, but there's also a lot of pain on occasion when issues beyond our control happen. So we do not want to be left behind. That's the simple request. Do not leave us behind as you're looking at the different sectors across this country that are going to need assistance and relief. And that is the message. Just do not leave us behind. And I now turn it over to Mayor Trina Jones to talk to the issues that we have brought forward today.
Thank you and good morning, and thanks for allowing me to share today from the east coast of Canada in Woodstock, New Brunswick, and we border the the community of Holton, Maine, who is at the very end of the I-95. So from my perspective, as was similar shared just previously, I hope our levels of government have learned some things from the pandemic and remember them today. Unfortunately, we all feel this feels very reminiscent of the pandemic, and the governments identified quickly then that the tough decisions that they had to make certainly impacted some businesses and sectors disproportionately than others. So we know that they have set aside money at provincial levels, federal levels for relief for businesses that are going to be impacted by the tariffs and everything we're experiencing. So I hope that they act quickly and smartly. We know as border mayors for our communities, there are already businesses that are being impacted by the uncertainty and certainly the degradation that we're seeing of relations. So the duty-free shops qualified during the pandemics, and I don't see any difference with the environment we're in today that they shouldn't be included. And they really need to be treated. So now they're certainly in a position where they're going to have tough decisions to make themselves. If they don't get support sooner rather than later, then some of them may have to close permanently. And we know we would like to see, we don't want to see that in our communities. They play an important role. They offer great service. So let's hope that the province and our province and our federal governments are hearing us and will act quickly. And I'm going to pass it off now to Mayor Dave Carlson. We're switching locations out in Emerson, Manitoba.
Thank you, Trina. I'm Reeve Dave Carlson from the municipality of Emerson Franklin. We're at the northern tip of the Mid-Continent Trade Corridor. Trade is extremely important and vital to our community and to our province. Transport businesses, ag businesses, customs brokerages, everything is here in our community, and they really rely on the trade. The Emerson Duty Free, I believe, is one of the oldest duty frees in Canada. It's been in operations for over 40 years. They're one of our largest employers with over 20 employees. I know that since the pandemic that they have suffered mightily for no fault of their own. You had a pandemic that shut down the border, and now you have potential full-on trade war that will affect their business even further. So we would like to see some supports from the federal government for our small businesses and for the duty free. They are a big network across Canada and I believe that they are a vital cog in our trading and relationships with the United States. So we would like to see those supports because we don't want to see these businesses go away. It's so very, very vital to us, and we're hoping that the federal government can sooner than later get to the bargaining table and get this resolved, because this has gone on far too long with rhetoric saying don't shop US, don't go to the United States. That affects a lot of jobs, a lot of businesses, and a lot of communities. So our hopes are that we can get past this sooner than later. And I'm going to pass it off to the Mayor of Stansted, Jody Stone.
Thank you very much, Mayor Carlson. Merci beaucoup au maire Carlson. Stansted est une petite communauté frontalière avec une population d'un peu plus de 3000 personnes. Une municipalité qui est collée sur la frontière américaine, où certains bâtisses s'étendent même au-delà de la frontière, créant un mélange unique, un endroit incroyable, vraiment à part dans la province. Sans la frontière, Stansted et les municipalités de Derbyline, Beatty Plain, du Vermont ne pourraient pas être pourrait même être considérée la même municipalité. Nos municipalités partagent des services comme l'eau, les égouts, nos services d'incendie s'aident en cas de sinistre. Nous avons même une rue qui est nommée Canusa pour Canada USA. Les maisons au sud sont en Amérique et les maisons du nord sont au Canada. Nous sommes aussi une ville qui a probablement le plus grand nombre de postes frontalières au Québec avec 3 postes, ce qui représente 1 à 1,2 million de voyageurs, dont 500 000 véhicules et 100 000 camions par année. L'impact d'avoir moins de Québécois qui traversent la frontière en direct sur l'économie locale, comme pour notre hors-taxe qui emploie plusieurs résidents de Stansted. Surtout pendant les mois d'été, je m'attends à encore avoir un plus grand impact. Les arrêts de repos avant de traverser la frontière, les petites collations à l'épicerie, même le petit café chez Tim Hortons, les stations de gaz aussi vont voir un impact. Stansted est aussi particulièrement touché par la décision politique américaine, surtout à cause de notre proximité. Dans quelques heures, nous avons une autre conférence de presse pour une fermeture d'accès de porte principale au Canada pour notre bibliothèque et salle d'opéra d'Haskell. J'ai le sentiment d'être attaqué de tous bords. Je crois que le gouvernement canadien doit considérer l'impact sur ses commerçants. Et à cause de cette guerre commerciale qui font des Américains. Je passerai la parole à Mayor Alan McKern. Sorry, I think I didn't pronounce your last name properly, but.
Thank you, Mayor Stone. Yes, Mayor McEachern from St. Stephen, New Brunswick, bordering Calais, Maine, here in our small border community. A lot of the stuff's been talked about, but I'm going to sort of repeat because it is important. Yes, our municipalities all along the borders suffered greatly through COVID, and that was, and we haven't got our feet underneath of us from that. We haven't recovered from that. So I think it's really important to understand that. But when our governments are asking us to stay united, it's very challenging for us to stay united and do these things, like not cross-border shop when we are so close to our neighbors. But in doing so, we need to know that our government's got our backs, and I got to let our community know that they got their backs and that are covered through this painstaking event that we're in. And so I would ask our federal and provincial government to let us know that, so we can let our citizens know. We, as you all know, all of the border mayors, we rely on the movement of people and product. And when people and product don't cross our borders, it's a huge impact to our communities, because we rely on people. Even though they are driving through St. Stephen to go to Calais, those people go through our communities and utilize our services and support our communities. So it's very important. And we saw that through the years of the pandemic. It was life-changing for us, and I don't want to see us go there. I know, again, I go back to, we need to stay united and get to this a resolution of this, and I know the goalpost keeps getting moved. I understand all that, but we got to let our citizens know that and let our neighbors know as well. Like, I'm very concerned because it's challenging, because us and border communities are also looking at our neighbors right in the eyes, like we're in the mix of it. We're not away from the borders like a lot of us, an hour away. It's a little easier not to participate, but for us, it's tough. It's tough, and I don't want to spoil our relationships once again. And yeah, I'll just leave it at that. A lot of the other stuff's been spoken about, so thank you. And I'll hand it off to Mayor Zalipa. If I got that right, sorry. If not,
Perfect.
please correct me.
It's good. Thank you, Mayor McEachern. It's all good. Mayor Zalepa. I'm here in Niagara-on-the-Lake, and I'm on the Niagara River, which is on the South Shore of Lake Ontario, and directly across from me is Lewiston, New York, and we have the Lewiston-Queenston Bridge crossing, which is a part of the interstate, New York State Interstate 190. Niagara Lake is located on almost all specialty cropland. So we're the big player in tender fruit, grape growing, and tourism, which all of you have talked about tourism, the importance of visits. Tariff impacts will increase the input costs of many of the cans and bottles and containers that all those industries need to put the products in and sell. And fruit and vegetable exports to the U.S. have similar issues with their containers and packaging. A lot of that material comes from the U.S. Tourism travel to and from the U.S. is also just being majorly impacted negatively. And we just can't have that. Travelers need to feel comfortable with visiting our communities, whether we're going to the US or the Americans are coming to visit us. Our local businesses are impacted by these possible tariffs. We have over 80 companies, approximately 1,700 residents whose jobs could be impacted by this. I have two calls for action. One is that federal and provincial governments need to immediately reduce interprovincial trade barriers, specifically in the agricultural sector on products of agriculture. Secondly, we would recommend a targeted financial assistance for impacted businesses that are dealing with rising input costs due to tariffs. We need incentives for those businesses to start exploring non-US supply chains for those input essentials, such as cans and bottles and packaging containers. This suggestion would be similar to the very successful VQA, the Vendor Quality Assurance Program that was put together in the 80s during the free trade talks then. So that's allowed our community to flourish for the past many years. So I thank you for the opportunity to talk, and I'd be happy to ask my colleague, the Mayor of Fort Erie, Wayne Redicott, for his remarks.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the Frontier Duty Free Association for putting this together. I'm the Mayor of Fort Erie, which is at the south end of the Niagara River, so we send all the river to Niagara Falls and Niagara-on-the-Lake. I want to go back to pre-9/11, when the flow of people and goods across the border was quite remarkable. Mayor Bradley from Sarnia and I have now had 9/11, the pandemic, and now the potential tariff wars to deal with. And after 9/11, the border thickened quite a bit. So that would have been the first challenge to duty-free and the hospitality restaurant industries along our borders, because that started to make it more difficult for people to actually cross the border. And even now, it's well known that there are more Canadians that have travel documents, passports, than Americans. And so that eliminates a fair number of the American population from coming to Canada. Since the pandemic, there really hasn't been a recovery along the border. And one of the challenges that any of the mayors that have been involved in 9/11 or the pandemic is to get Ottawa to understand what the dynamic on the border actually is. We do have our MPs that represent us, and they're familiar with the dynamic, but there are many, many members of Parliament who are completely unfamiliar and don't have an understanding of the nature of the personal relationships or the family relationships or the business relationships that exist across that border. That's all fundamental for our economies along the border and for the broader economy to be successful, so that anything that impedes the flow of people impacts duty-free stores on both sides of the border. It affects the restaurants, the hospitality industry, tourism. Niagara Falls, Ontario has about 3 to 4 million Americans come to visit each year, and that's in jeopardy. So we have to hope that we can impress upon the federal government what the dynamic here is along the border, that our businesses need assistance because we are on the front line, has been mentioned. And we're trying very hard to make sure that our American neighbors still feel welcome to come to Canada. That becomes more and more challenging as this tariff war continues, or the uncertainty of it continues, because personal feelings start to take over, and that impedes the flow of people. So we're looking for the support of the federal government, also the provincial government, for our businesses that are on the front line and are suffering probably more than any of the other businesses across our country. So again, thank you for allowing me an opportunity to speak here. I'm going to hand this over now to Mayor Sue McCordock.
Thank you very much, and welcome everybody. We are a small 5,500 population community right on the midway through British Columbia, right on the border. Our main route is Highway 97. It's a very important route, north-south route. Businesses, trucks, people go across there all the time. When I was down, and I live very close to the border, I went down the other day and talked to the people on the Canadian border services, and there were, I think, 2 cars that went south and 2 cars that came north. Now, it was a Saturday, it wasn't great weather, but still, it just shows that it's very, very sparse. My initial look was to see our duty-free shop down there, which has been very busy over the years, and they were closed on that day, and I can't say I blame them. During COVID, we obviously had some businesses that were impacted at that time. However, because we are known for sometimes being the warmest place in Canada and a resort municipality, we did have a lot of people that came to Osoyoos because we have motels, because we have restaurants. Right now, we have quite a few American cars coming up and shopping at our grocery stores because their dollar is worth more, and they can, and we're happy to welcome them. The problem is that we're not having a lot of people heading south. I think Cam does probably a pretty good business in the fall because lots of our Canadian snowbirds like to go down to the States for 3 or 4 months. We're not sure how that's going to impact everybody now. People say to me, well, I don't think that we should be going across the border. I say, I intend to. My family, my kids and grandkids live in California. So believe me, I'm going to continue to go down there, and I will be happy to do that. I don't have a problem with most of the American people. I just have a problem with a few of them at the top, which has caused a great deal of concern here. But our businesses, and I've talked to a few of them that do go back and forth across the border, trucking businesses, they're kind of concerned, they're confused, they're a little afraid, they're not quite sure what's going to happen next because things seem to change daily and hourly sometimes. And so it is unnerving for any of us. But I must say that one of the best businesses in town is the duty-free shop, which Cameron Bissonnette owns with his family. They've been very supportive of the town. They've hired people in the town, and we're very happy to try and support them, because I've known Cameron since I don't know whether he was born in Osoyoos or not, but anyway, I was a teacher for a long time, and so I certainly know the Bissonnette family, and they've been great citizens and volunteers in our town. So I'm going to turn it over to Cameron Bissonnette, who owns the duty-free shop. Thanks, Cameron.
Thank you, Mayor. Excuse me, and thank you for your support. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Barb, for putting this together, and thank you to all the border community mayors for being here. Obviously, these are extremely challenging times. I'm going to come at it from a completely different perspective here. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a second-generation duty-free operator. My parents were awarded 2 licenses in British Columbia in the mid-1980s, one here in Osoyoos, also one in the East Kootenays. So one of my crossings goes into Washington State. The other one goes into Idaho. Had the pleasure of working with my family for a number of years, worked with my sister until she retired. I ended up
buying the remaining family members out in about 2007, 2008 was a wonderful business for many, many years. I just did an interview with Castanet talking about how great the business is. We get people who are either starting their vacation, going into the United States, and they're getting some of the world's most well-known brands at 25 to 40% discount, or it's Americans who've been up to Canada, maybe been to Banff, Jasper, wine touring in the Okanagan, same thing. Their dollar goes a lot further, so they're always in a good mood. Great place for my staff to work. They all really enjoy meeting people from all over the world. So me being a second generation duty-free owner, I've had to have the conversation with my two children. I have a 25-year-old son and a 22-year-old daughter about, it doesn't look like there's going to be much business here for you in the future. So they're pursuing different paths now because it doesn't look like there's going to be much left. My family's been here since 1978. COVID was, as we all know, was horrible. We spent 2 years where sales were down basically 90 to 95%. Pretty tough to run a business that way, living off of the subsidies that were there for us, the CEBA loan, which I'm still having to pay off, rent subsidies, wage subsidies, which were helpful. But of course, I've had to fund the business myself out of my personal savings to keep the lights on. Sorry about that. Pay taxes, all the things that come with running a small business. Didn't expect this. Sorry about that.
There's nothing to be sorry about.
But anyway, living in Osoyoos, and I've even had to make a career change. I'm now living in Kelowna. Started a career in real estate finance because I could see the writing on the wall. Have really good people that work for me, taking care of it for me while I do other things. I haven't collected a paycheck from my business since June of last year. Now it's getting to the point where I'm wondering, how much longer can I pay my staff? We just did a survey within our association. 25 to 30% of the people are wondering if they're going to be here in 6 months. I was asked a question, how long do you think your business can remain solvent? And that was a punch to the gut because I really had to think about it. It's the first time I thought, am I going to be here? How long will I be here for? The Duty-Free Association, much like Canada in general, we're small, we're scrappy. We are always going to punch against above our weight. We're survivors, so we're going to do everything we can. But right now, it really feels like we are hostages in economic warfare. We know that aluminum, lumber, the automotive industry, they employ hundreds of thousands of people in this country. The difference between the small duty-free association and some of those industries is they can pivot. They can sell their products elsewhere in the world. We can't. During COVID, I couldn't even sell my domestic chocolate bars to my brother-in-law who has the dollar store in town. CBSA would not let me take any of that inventory out and try to just get my costs back on it. So we're in a really challenging spot here. Every single product that leaves my front door has to go into the United States. As Mayor McCordoff said, there's some days, well, I shouldn't say a dozen cars. I mean, there's more than that, but I had one day last week where I had a negative $67 day at my store because someone came in to do a refund. That's how dire it is. So, we understand there's going to be a fund that is going to be created here. We're not looking for a lot of money. We just want to be able to stay solvent. We want to be able to pay our bills. We want to be able to pay our staff and, hopefully be here for the next 5 or 10, 20 years or however long that's going to be. So again, appreciate everybody being here. Sorry about the emotions coming up, but
Thank you, Ken. And don't feel badly about the emotions. I know I hear what you're living through, and unfortunately, your story, you're not alone in your story, that there are a number of businesses and border community businesses across Canada who are feeling that same kind of pain. So thank you so much for sharing your story. I'd like to thank you and all the mayors and speakers here today for sharing your powerful stories and making it clear what's at stake for Canada's border communities. What we've heard today is not just a warning, it's a call to action. These communities are resilient, but they cannot face this growing economic pressure alone. The federal government must step up now with targeted support to ensure these businesses, jobs, and people who depend on cross-border traffic are not left behind. So I'd like to thank you, the media, for being here. I'm going to hand it over to Philippe to repeat in French, and then he will open up the floor for questions. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup à tous les maires. Merci beaucoup, Cam, de nous avoir partagé vos points de vue frappants et de nous démontrer ce qui est en jeu dans nos communautés frontalières. Ce que nous avons entendu aujourd'hui n'est pas un avertissement, c'est un appel à l'action. Ces communautés sont résilientes, mais elles ne peuvent faire face à une pression économique grandissante seules. Le gouvernement fédéral doit intervenir maintenant avec un effort ciblé, avec un support ciblé, et s'assurer que ces entreprises, les emplois et les gens qui dépendent des voyageurs transfrontaliers ne soient pas laissés derrière. Nous voulons remercier les médias de leur présence et de nous aider à contribuer à mettre en lumière ce problème urgent. Nous aimerions maintenant ouvrir la période de questions. Pour ce faire, s'il vous plaît, utilisez le bouton de main levée et nous vous appellerons un par un. Barbara.
Merci, Philippe. I'll now ask you to use the raise hand function and open the floor to questions to the media. I see Nick Taylor. Please go ahead.
That's me. Hi,
Yep, go
it's
ahead.
Nick Taylor Basie from Politico. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm wondering if the Duty Free Association or the Border Mayors Alliance that I know is meeting has a direct line into the federal government, if there's a point of contact on specifically these issues that is producing any kind of back and forth, useful back and forth.
You want to take that, Mayor Bradley?
I will. And I want to go back and just appreciate Cam for painting the human picture of what's happening out there. We're resurrecting those connections. We have this new Canadian Border Mayors Alliance, which is growing. Given the present political situation, I would say that we're probably on hold for the next 4 or 5 weeks. And then we'll be making a full court press to make sure that these communities, these individual businesses, can receive the funding they need to survive. And I go back to a lot of the comments made. We've been dog paddling now for the last 4 or 5 years because of COVID. And this is the last thing we needed to happen, to have these type of tariffs come at us and cause the destruction they will. But once we're through this federal election, we will, whoever the government is, we'll be making our case specifically for border communities.
Do you have a follow-up, Nick?
Yeah, I do. I'm also wondering about, I appreciate that answer. And I'm wondering about the conversations with counterparts on the other side of the border as well. I know the Border Mayors Alliance is trying to connect with American mayors and have those conversations filter out to decision makers in Washington and other capitals. I'm wondering if there's a bit of a status report as Canada goes through its as you just alluded to, its election period, what those conversations and any progress that's going on with Americans.
Nick, I could address that. The Canadian Border Alliance individually have been reaching out. I'm a crossing reporter here in Michigan. I know Wayne and all the other mayors have been reaching out quietly to American border mayors. I would say privately you hear encouraging comments, supportive comments. The political situation, though, in the U.S. right now dictates that most of them are remaining silent publicly. The Great Lakes Initiative, which is a group of mayors on the both sides, all sorts of politics, focused on environmental issues on the Great Lakes and economic issues, have also reached out directly to the White House and actually had a delegation go there a couple of Fridays ago to present our viewpoint about the tariffs and all the other economic chaos that we're enduring. So there's in fact, at this point, there's so many good initiatives going on, and many of us are part of a number of them, but it's a full court press trying to keep the pressure on the American government and other politicians at other levels. And this is what helped us a lot in the first Trump regime, senators, congressmen, and mayors coming on board to be supportive and hoping in time that we'll get the same support we got back 4 or 5 years ago.
Mayor Zalepa, I think you want to add to that?
If I could, thanks Mayor Bradley for that. I just wanted to add to that in Niagara with Mayor Redekop and Mayor Diodati and Chair Bradley, we've created a partnership with the mayors across the Niagara Frontier. And we've been meeting, and we've had a meeting. We have a joint statement to go out very soon. I know I've seen some final versions that we've been working on. So I think it's really helpful for our communities to reach out to our partners across, whether it's the river, across the border. And that I think will be very fruitful and timely. They'll send a message to their governments. We'll be sending messages to our governments. Thank you. Thanks, Barbara.
Thank you, Mayor Zalepa. I think next we have Global News. Your question, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is Suzanne Lapointe. I'm with Global News in New Brunswick. So my question is for both of the New Brunswick mayors present on the call. Perhaps you can answer one at a time. Earlier, Mayor Wayne Redekop, apologies if I'm saying the name wrong, mentioned the dynamic on the border and how politicians weren't really aware of the dynamic. Can you both speak to the dynamic in your border towns? Are you seeing any hostility from Americans coming in, or how is that dynamic presently?
Who do you want to go first?
You can go first.
Okay. No, we're not seeing any hostility, but there's a fear of it. Like I was talking to the Mayor Rogers in Calais, and she even told a story about just coming over and going to her favorite restaurant. She comes over here in St. Stephen, and she's worried about her license plate. So the fear is there, but no, I don't know of any hostility. The love is still there. It's mostly confused citizens trying to get through this new issue that we're dealing with the tariffs, and it's just a lot of confusion, and that's it. I'm not seeing any hostility.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well, that really we're not seeing any type of hostility. We've been friendly neighbors for a long time, and we don't see that changing. We're all quietly going about our business and doing our thing. I would say Houlton certainly is in a position where they're very conscious of what's happening with any notion on power, because NB Power does feed the community across the border from us substantially with power. So we do know that they have some concerns on what the repercussions may be. Our Premier Susan Holt has not really gone there and doesn't intend to unless need be. So I think, we're conscious of that, because that would be a major impact to them and relations. So we understand the fears, and same as Mayor McEachran, there's lots of fear, but there's really no hostility from what we can see.
Thank you, Suzanne. Do you have a follow-up?
Yes, New Brunswick is the most dependent on trade with the US of all the Canadian provinces. Do you think that, and I'm speaking again to both mayors from New Brunswick, do you think that New Brunswick should receive a bigger proportion of aid in light of this, the financial aid from the federal government?
You want me to go, or you go first this time, Mayor Jones?
Sure. Yeah, well, I mean, that's tricky, and I think time will tell, but we do know New Brunswick is going to be extremely susceptible. So I think our Premier's very conscious of that. She's at the table we're looking at, and there was an announcement this week basically asking for at least an Atlantic Canada alliance to open free trade. That's what we need to be seeing. We need to see movement there so that we can start to help build what we can within our own means to help offset some of what's coming or what may come. So, but it isn't none of it doesn't pass over any of us that here in New Brunswick that we are definitely going to see a major impact. So we expect, though, that our Premier and the provincial governments will fight for what it is that we need, and so we'll hope that we all fare and get some equal distribution, and maybe some of us need a little more help than others, and the rest of the provinces might have to be kind. But right now, there's just so much unknown that we'll see what happens in time.
Thank you.
Yeah, so yeah, Mayor Jones pretty much nailed everything there. I would just add that Woodstock in Mayor Jones' territory and here in St. Stephen, we are the gateway to the Atlantic provinces, actually.
Yeah.
So we got a lot of weight on our shoulders there. So it's just not New Brunswick that we're thinking of, because again, I go back to the movement of people and product, and that's how our communities are based on. And again, that all funnels through us too, the majority of that traffic. We just lost last month was 26,000 people in the province of New Brunswick didn't cross the borders just in a month. That's huge impact to us. So, but again, and I'll just leave that at that. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Next, we have La Presse. Julian, thank you. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Hi, bonjour. My question will be for Mr. Stone. You can answer in French, but I'll ask in English, because if someone else wants to jump in, feel free to jump in. Mr. Stone, can you provide like a concrete example of what is going on in terms of you know, the downturn that you are seeing from activity, giving the tariff war or the actual context? So if you have examples, and do you still see the flow coming in from the United States, given that the exchange rate is great for them? Trying to get a sense if the slowdown is more observed from the Canadian border rather than the US, or it's on both sides. Thanks.
Oui, mais pour donner un exemple, c'est vraiment la question des hors-taxes. On a vu vraiment une diminution du trafic du Québec vers les États-Unis. Je parlais avec un douanier, puis normalement, s'il y a 400 véhicules qui passent pendant son shift, mais là, c'était rendu à 100. Fait que, on a vu une diminution de 75% du trafic. Fait que ça a un impact. Fait que ça veut dire que c'est 75% moins de monde qui peuvent passer au hors-taxe. Présentement, on n'a pas vu tant d'impact sur les petits commerces parce que c'est quand même l'hiver. Il y a moins de trafic un peu. Fait que le Tim Hortons, l'épicerie, ces choses-là n'ont pas vu l'impact encore. Mais on a une petite crainte que cet été, pendant le haut du trafic, quand les gens vont souvent au Old Orchard ou ailleurs, ils arrêteront, ils passeront plus. Fait que ces commerces-là qui s'attendent à avoir des mois plus forts en revenus, mais ils ne l'auront pas. Fait que ça va avoir un peu plus de mise sur leur portefeuille. Pour l'exemple de l'inverse, par exemple, des Américains, c'est une bonne question. J'ai sondé des commerçants, même hier, pour voir l'impact que ça a sur ces commerçants-là. Présentement, on n'a pas vu de baisse. Puis, ils ne s'attendent pas non plus d'en avoir à cause que nos communautés sont tissées très serrées. Les Américains viennent toujours nous encourager dans nos commerces à Stansted. Puis c'est la même chose, on espère un peu que nos Canadiens vont continuer à supporter les communautés frontalières comme avant pour pas perdre notre relation qu'on a entre nos deux pays, nos deux communautés. Je ne sais pas si ça répond à ta question.
Oui, parfait, merci. And as a follow-up, I just wanted to have an idea. You're kind of requesting support measure, not a lot of maybe money, but is that loans? What kind of financial support or help you're seeking to go through this anticipated crisis?
Is that something that you want to answer, Barbara, for the specifics, or? I think my understanding was that we're just wanting to make sure that we're not forgotten, that it's understood that, excuse-moi, qu'on n'a pas été oublié, que les villes frontalières sont importantes, qui sont impactées peut-être un peu plus grandement que peut-être d'autres communautés. But I'll let Barbara maybe answer more specifically.
Yeah, Julian, if you're okay if I answer in English.
Sure, no worries.
Merci. Yeah, so we are looking for support in kind of whatever form it takes. Financial support would be ideal. I think our stores in particular are in such in a position where even a low interest loan would be difficult for them, as they're still paying off loans from COVID period. So we are certainly looking for some financial support from the government, but also other supports, kind of like they did throughout COVID, with helping keeping staff on, so and rent, that kind of thing. So certainly financial support is what we're looking for.
Great, thanks.
Okay. I think up next we have the Toronto Star.
Sorry, hi, Josh Rubin from the Toronto Star. Hi, guys. And sorry, this is, I guess, for the Ontario mayors, in particular, Mayor Redekop and Zalepa. Obviously, you know, you guys see a lot of, like any of the border communities, you see a lot of people going both ways, and it, you know, supports the economies. There's community ties and everything. How long do you figure before the damage from this trade war becomes permanent? And, you know, I mean, like, you know, I know some industries, you know, they're, you know, whether they're manufacturing widgets or cars, they say, okay, we can survive. There might be some temporary layoffs, but, you know, we only anticipate this going for a quarter. Like, have you done any forecasting about kind of, you know, how long businesses, kind of like, you know, particularly in the tourism and duty-free industry, can survive with, you know, with the trade war going on? I mean, because this is like a complete reset of how these relationships work right now.
So I'll start, Gary, if you don't mind.
Thanks.
So there's a short answer and a long answer, and the shorter answer is that for some relationships, they'll endure, won't matter, because there are families involved, and there are long-standing personal relationships and long-standing business relationships. So those will overcome. You have to remember that there are many, many Americans that are as baffled by what's coming out of Washington as Canadians, and they're not happy about it, because the same impacts that we're feeling are being felt by businesses and people across the river or the border. So the longer answer is that some of the companies, especially the larger companies, the ones that are better financed, have made calculations. They've determined how long they can go depending on what happens, what type of alternate plans they can make to ensure that their business continues on. That could include assembly in the States. It could include trying to buy some of their products and do some light manufacturing in the States in the interim. There are other businesses, though, that are not going to economically survive very long. They import product from the States, and then they complete a product and send it back to the States. So they're being hit twice. Their alternative would be to try to set up a business in the States if they can do that. Some will be able to, some won't. I don't think they're the larger businesses, but they're the smaller businesses with potential for growth, so they have an impact on us. I think the real challenge will occur if this drags on, if the uncertainty drags on, and if the tariffs drag on. People will start to lose their jobs. They won't be able to make decisions about moving forward with large purchases. It'll affect decisions about where their children can go to school in terms of costs. And that begins to create, I think, some personal animosities. And so right now, most of the mayors are trying to keep a lid on what's happening in our communities. We want our American neighbors to come and visit. We want our residents to be courteous and not get taken up with the rhetoric that's coming out of the White House. But we are Canadians. And so, you know, we don't have to like what's coming out of Washington, but I think we need to make sure that we focus on the administration and not necessarily the people of the United States. But that becomes more and more challenging, as I said, as businesses fail because of this, as people lose their jobs because of this. And that will have impacts, again, not just in Canada, but across the border. So people in Fort Erie or Niagara or Southern Ontario who are season ticket holders for the Buffalo Sabres or the Buffalo Bills or the Buffalo Bisons or the Buffalo Bandits, or who go to the cultural events in Buffalo or the restaurants over there, they won't go. And so there will be economic impacts there. And we're going to feel the same thing here because people on the other side of the border will start losing their jobs as well. So it's a terrible situation to be in. It's particularly difficult when you can't fathom what the rationale is, if there is a rationale. And so that's why we're here. We want to make sure that we can support our businesses. And the businesses in the hospitality industry, duty free, those are big players in our communities. And the larger the community, the more important they are for our communities. And so, as well as the economy of Ontario. So that's the long answer. Sorry.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I would just add, and I just want to add, I think we're still in our early spring season here for tourism and in agricultural sector as well. But as we head into the summer, this is when the pain's going to hit. So we're really watching that, as Mayor Redekop just said. We want to encourage visitation. I think if we start to see local businesses find alternative supply chains for some of the items they need, that will set a major reset in our businesses, and that may signify not relying on the U.S. as much in the future. So I think that's the thing to watch.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Josh. Canadian Press, CP? And then I think we'll take one more after that, and then we'll have to let these mayors get back to their busy jobs. So CP, please go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I have a question for Mayor Jody Stone, and he can answer in French if he would like to. My question is that Mayor, what is your response to the U.S. decision, obviously, that they have taken to block the main entrance of the library on the border area?
C'est certainement, je suis déçu. C'est un droit que les citoyens du Canada avaient depuis plus de 100 ans. C'est vraiment une déception de notre part. Ça montre à quel point c'est fragile, les relations entre deux pays. C'est sûr que la bibliothèque va faire l'annonce cet après-midi, mais on va se monter on va travailler fort pour s'assurer que les Canadiens vont toujours pouvoir utiliser puis de rentrer dans cette bibliothèque historique qui fait les nouvelles presque à tous les jours maintenant. Mais on ne lâchera pas, on va continuer d'avancer, puis on va rester toujours positif que nos relations avec les Américains vont continuer, ils vont s'améliorer dans les mois, les années à venir.
Thank you.
Ça répond à ta question?
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
I don't have any follow-up question.
I think we have time for one more, and then I think we have CBC New Brunswick. Are you on the line?
Yes, it's Mia Urquhart from CBC New Brunswick.
Thank you.
My question is for Mayor Jones. You talked about already seeing the impacts. Can you paint that picture a little more clearly?
I think ultimately we can confirm, as others would, that the traffic flow has already decreased substantially. And you can see the mood in the communities where they just don't necessarily want to go back and forth across, the borderline, and everybody's just feels like they're in a standstill. So we have a lot of industry sitting, waiting, wondering what to do with their projects. So they may be withholding and just sitting on projects. So again, I would suggest that there's certainly businesses out there that would feel an impact simply because the uncertainty alone has made it challenging for them to make good business decisions. And then again, you look at the industries and in particular today, the duty-free shops, and John Slip and his family-owned business, and they've been here, done this, and with the pandemic, and are again, you hear them speak to the fact that they're still paying off CEBA loans. There's many businesses that are still paying off their CEBA loans. So looking at the situation today, thinking that they're going to potentially go down this same track is very, very, I would assume, very discouraging for all of them. And looking at, to speak to the question earlier, what types of funding do we need? We don't need, I would suggest loans, and I would love to see the federal government look closely at what that did to those that had to take the CEBA loans. So the relief that was most effective was to help keep people employed and help keep the businesses open, regardless of whether, you know, they had a busy business or not. We'll see impacts even here locally with restaurants. I'm sure across the border, they're feeling that as well. So again, just seeing the reduced traffic, and I can't speak to outside, I guess, all of New Brunswick, but everybody's just feels like they're in a holding pattern. They're trying to figure out how to move their business forward, and we're business people, so we don't have the, you know, we're wrapped up in a tariff war and it's impacting us. So I would suggest that's kind of where I'm coming from that line, if that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Okay, I don't think we got to all the media questions. I do have to end the press conference now. Please follow up if you have further questions, and we'll get you some individual interviews. I thank everybody. I thank our border community mayors and our speakers today, and the media for being here. And we'll call the press conference to a close. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks very much, Barbara.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.